What's going on, everybody? It's Frito here from your Overwatch. In today's video, I want to review what we expect to be the final beta for Overwatch 2. The game releases in 2 months. Is it ready? A lot still seems in flux and will continue to be even after the release, I think. So there's no getting away from the work in progress feel for the PvP and the whole game moving forward. However, I will say, and I think a lot more players are like me now, having gone from Overwatch 2 back to 1, it's easy to say I'm addicted to Overwatch 2 and can't wait to get the full game back in my hands. So I'm locked in. But seeing as we're transferring to the live service free-to-play model, we as the community get to be loud and obnoxious and expect results. So even though I'm quite happy and just want to get to play the game again, I'm going to continue to hold Blizzard accountable to work and improve the game as much as possible. Today's video sponsor is Manscaped, and they're in a battle against gamer groin. If you're a try-hard, sweaty gamer like me, it can come with some gross side effects. But don't worry, Manscaped has your back with the Performance Package 4.0. The first thing you gotta deal with is the hair downstairs. It can collect bacteria and sweat and just be gross. I don't need to teach you why you need to trim down there. Use the Manscaped Lawnmower 4.0 like me, and you won't regret it. It's the best shaver in the business because it has the patented skin-safe technology. It's the only shaver I would ever trust using down there. It's waterproof, cordless, and has a built-in light, so it's perfect for using in the shower. But we're not done there. We're gonna address that gamer groin atmosphere you got down there. That swamp is evolving new species. Get ahead of the game and prepare yourself with ball deodorant. And in the clutch, pop out the Crop Reviver for a handy, quick refresher. The appeal of your basement is highly correlated with the smell. And if you'd like a friend or friends to visit more often, sprucing up. You won't regret it. Oh, it's magical. You gotta come smell this. You'll also get the Weed Whacker. This is a personal favorite of mine. Nose and ear hairs are gone. And 2 free gifts, the Shed Travel Bag, and battle that swampy gamer crotch with the Manscaped Anti-Chafing Boxer Briefs. Head on over to manscaped.com and use our promo code OVERWATCH at checkout to get 20% off and free shipping. That's promo code OVERWATCH at checkout and get 20% off and free shipping. Start battling that gamer groin today. I think the biggest addition to Beta 2 was Junker Queen. In my previous video talking about Junkrat's buff, I had a big section that was effectively a meta discussion talking about her balance and how it affects the game and the difference between pub characters and team characters. But for this video, I merely want to say she's fun to play. However, I ran out of footage playing her, so the gameplay in the pack will be me countering her, which maybe is the most important aspect of new heroes to me, where not only what she does and how she does it is fun for her, I enjoyed interacting with her as any role, which makes me feel like she's a positive addition into the game. My conclusion on her, especially as it's changed the meta of the game in the beta, is that whenever there's tank and support abilities, particularly new ones that are just different or a mechanic that only that hero has, it's going to have a disproportionate effect at higher tiers if it's any good. But I think with Overwatch 2, I'm leaning harder away from the high-end gameplay more than I ever have before, because I sort of feel like they've made their own bed with the format they play in, all pick, and the results they're going to get shouldn't be a shock to them. And frankly, it's not the rest of the community's problem that the game doesn't perfectly work for pre-mades and the average player at the same time, trying to balance for both. So not my problem at the end of the day. The cool thing I find with Junker Queen is that it doesn't feel like one tank can utterly break the game. I might feel a bit different about that when we finally get competitive, because frankly, the matchmaking for the beta felt like the MMR of the players involved had a much bigger disproportionate impact than the heroes that were getting played. So it's kind of hard to be firm on this opinion, but overall, even when there's a matchmaking difference in the tank category, which is probably the most overwhelming of any hero to have a gap on your team versus theirs, even then, as any role, I felt like I could have a big impact. And even if I lose the game, I have plays to make, which is the beauty of the 5v5 format. The thing I'm optimistic about is that even when they give crazy deathmatchy style aggressive cooldowns on a tank, it still feels like the ones that have shields or play a bit safer are just easier to play with randoms, and there's kind of a natural counterbalance to that, where the trade-offs of having Junker Queen is that they better go in and pop off, and if they don't, the guy holding the shield for his team seems to just have an easy time. And I'm not sure what they do about this, because it's not really a balance consideration. It's a, are you any good at the hero issue? And while, yeah, the pros maybe can maximize Commanding Shout and make it look like the most OP thing in the game, for the most part, a lot of the Junker Queens I went against or maybe had on my team were some of the biggest dead weight players I've ever seen. So it's hard for me to be like, yeah, she's clearly overpowered, when you have to execute her to get that out of her. And well, that seems fair, doesn't it? Or about as fair as Overwatch can be. I'm optimistic now for future tank additions to the game, because as strong as they can be, there's still just going to be one player in 5v5. And seeing this play out has enforced the positive opinion I have about the format, in that because the RPG team comp builder aspect of the game isn't the be-all end-all, it still matters, but executing your hero matters more. Well, for most tiers, you're going to feel like it's better to play something you understand over combining into the right build just to function as a team. That makes the game way more playable for most people. So I'm happy about that. All right, next subject. Let's talk about the new map, Rio, and the maps and game modes in general. I saw a lot of players, especially high-end competitive ones, hate Rio either overall or at the very least the starting section of it, because it is one of those like oppressive, the defending team has high ground, looks down at you through chokes. And I have to imagine that at higher tiers, where the aim is much better, turning the corner out of spawn as the attackers is a bit of a nightmare. But for me, I feel biased in this way, because not only did I like the assault game mode, but you know, I admit it had to go because the community doesn't like it, so who cares what I think. But I'm also a hyper flex player where I play all three roles and a lot of heroes in all of them, which isn't how most people play. If they're a competitive player, they usually try to play one role and maybe even just half of the heroes or less in that role, maybe committing to like a sub role within the role. So because of that, it might not be so easy for them to do what I do, which is, well, I'll just play vertical heroes on this map and then adapt to the map. I feel like the Overwatch community asks for two different things at the same time. It's like a lot of players agree. Wouldn't it be cool if the map design required different meta picks? I think that's cool. Like Casino Royale is the sniper map in the game, right? Well, Rio to me is the high ground dive map in the game. Lots and lots of high ground. I think I specifically asked for map design to matter over years in Overwatch and said, why don't they make a map that's just like filled with high ground? And they did. And I guess that means I'm the one at fault because I specifically asked for this. Got it. I'm happy with it, but a lot of people don't like it. So what do I know at the end of the day? I think this map is beautiful and has a lot of fun engagements. It's hard to sometimes get into the positions you need to take to have an impact on Rio. There's certain PowerPoint high ground spots that are so dominant, you have to go fight for them. And I see a lot of players, specifically when I'm in like lower MMR games in the beta, funnel in on the low ground and just get dominated repeatedly. It reminds me of Horizon Lunar Colony's first choke, which is a map that I didn't hate, but I also felt like I had the hero flexibility or patience to play the map that we're given. I don't know what to do about this. Maybe they can just add an extra flank on the far right-hand side, escaping out of attacker spawn to make everybody happy. But on the other hand, this might be my favorite map in the whole game with just how beautiful it is. And I don't know if you've dug around inside this map at all, but it's like a love letter to Lucio. And as a huge Lucio fan, and I'm a fan of a lot of heroes, I know, but like if you remember over years when they'd add a map, they might like add a little cave where Sombra does her planning of how she's going to infiltrate Volskaya over here. Little Easter eggs riddled throughout the map. Rio instead feels like that for Lucio exploded over the entire map. And I couldn't be happier about it. So I just have fun being in the environment, but I also like the way the engagements play out. Overall, if map design is going to matter as much as it does for gameplay, it means even more that we need to know what the map pick or maybe even map draft game mode is going to be for Overwatch 2. Because I can see if you only play low ground heroes, you're like, well, what the heck, Blizzard? It's sort of like playing Havana in Overwatch 1 and you don't have a sniper in your class. You just never want to be playing that map. Well, I don't know what to tell you guys. We were asking for map pick agency in competitive for literal years at this point. I know it's important. And they said we'll get something like that in Overwatch 2. Have not been told what it is. I bet it's going to be in the full competitive 2.0 announcement, I hope. But until then, we have to sit and wait and assume the best we have is the random map selector, which is not workable for a reliable experience, in my opinion, when there's just so many different playstyles in the game and your effectiveness as a player is so warped by the map the RNG selector picks for you, especially when you consider you're getting random teammates as well, and who knows if you're getting a sim on Havana or a full low ground team on Rio. That's just not fun, and that's got to change. I'll talk quickly about push as a game mode. I feel I've put too much of this discussion in previous videos, so I won't go too far in it, but push as a mode is fun for me. It's quite open, and there's a constant state of reassessing whether you should regroup or not. So you kind of have to think about anchoring around key pivot positions to gradually take map control. So as a casual, I like it. However, I'm going to shout out Avril, who's the host of the Tactical Crouch podcast, as well as a caster for the Overwatch League, who has very good explanations of why it breaks down as a competitive mode. Because whereas, let's say in a game mode like Control, you capture the point and want to be contesting the objective to rack up percentage as long as you can and die on point if you have to, then regroup. Push as a mode competitively is best played to constantly regroup. So you don't actually push in the mode push. If you're not at an advantage, you should always soft reset. So it's constantly like not taking map control because it's too expensive and risky to do so, and it is the most cagey game mode we've ever seen. So what I think the devs nailed is the feeling of playing around the robot, but the score system or the speed that it moves or how the spawns work and all these other things maybe need to be looked at, similar to how they made a lot of complex rules for Assault that eventually kind of worked. They're gonna have to tweak push in order to incentivize the gameplay we want to see, or maybe we just get used to it kind of being a wonky mode that frankly is more casual than competitive. And this happens, and I don't know if you guys know this, but I've done YouTube for 11 years now, half of them doing Overwatch, but the majority of the other half was covering Call of Duty. And in that scene, they would try to add a new game mode and then force it to be competitive. And it's just so obvious that it's a casual mode and it's not going to work. Push feels like that to me. But don't worry, we've got a flourishing organic esports scene that I'm sure will take care of itself and not force bad decisions from the mode. Never mind, we don't have that. What am I saying? No, of course, Blizzard makes all the decisions. So the new mode's got to be in the competitive scene, and this is going to have some friction as that integrates come Overwatch 2. Most important takeaway, I think push is fun. I'm curious if we can see a map like push that isn't constant flanks, because Coliseo and New Queen Street are like so wide open that you need to have heroes that are like horizontally mobile just to have a chance to like regroup in the soft reset metagame. And I wonder if there was more structured engagements with less flanks, but like set positions, almost like, I don't know, a mode like Assault, you know, where you have some map that you have to tactically take. I don't know, maybe I'm just an old boomer and I'm trying to get the strategy aspect of the game back in. I'll repeat some things I've said in other videos, but I feel the tactics and individual carry of the game has made 2 steps forward, but some of the slow play and strategy has taken like 2 steps backwards, because 5v5 already makes the game flanky, and then on top of that, they made the map super flanky. So I wonder if map design could sort of fix this, along with other tweaks to the mode. But what do I know? I'm just a nerd in his pajamas speaking into a microphone. Next subject, I want to talk about each individual hero role. Starting out with the most contentious, the support role. Made a dedicated video about the state of supports, especially with the changes to Moira. But now that they've reverted her, it sort of opens up a new, broader discussion. I'll say the support passive getting nerfed a bit is probably a healthier place for it to be, but at the same time, they buffed the role individually in so many different ways. And if you start to add up all those buffs and think about what we're going to get at release, support's going to feel powerful. Like Mercy being able to super jump and do the Guardian Angel cancel. Well, now she's got tons of movement. And I like that change because it's the type of thing I feel like you can give a character in Overwatch, mobility, that won't necessarily break the character because it's not inherent stats. It's something that you do as a counterplay to the enemy aggressing onto you, which naturally has a skill component because, well, if you can't utilize the movement well, you're not going to get away and you'll just die. As opposed to, say, making her healing super powerful, which would mess up breakpoints. Messing with the positioning aspect of the game is always going to be healthy, I think, in Overwatch 2, considering the asymmetric nature of 5v5. I like that they finally brought Zen back in line. Sparta Kick is the kind of OP ability that I think is good for supports, but breakpoints get tricky when you just have tanky health, so they had to get rid of that, especially when you consider the extra health he would get from Joker Queen. Baptiste, I think, is like low-key the underrated hero of the category, where his regenerative burst, instant healing targets that are low, is super powerful, but also like so incredibly fun from the support position. If you're the type of player that wants to be able to cast an ability and see a big effect and use your brain and timings in order to make things happen, that's the kind of thing that I think is nuts, because it requires you to manage that ability, and it feels like you're that super powered caster in the backline. And when I said that in my supports video, I think some viewers felt like I meant support should be relegated to be the skillless role that's just about MOBA timings. Well, I don't think that, actually, because those MOBA timings can be attached to characters like Ana and Baptiste. You can still have a shooter-based hero with those abilities, right? It's just that if a hero is, let's say, and we'll transition the conversation now to Moira, a character whose shooter skill is very low, and overall I think is just like an easier skill floor hero than Brig. I don't even think that's debatable, right? Like, most players struggle to play Brig because she's so positioning and timing based, or even Mercy, who in order to make an impact requires more game sense timing and repositioning. Moira just sort of like is always a get out of jail free exist hero. And while I liked Weaken for the same reasons I like Baptiste having an overpowered super heal, they're going back to the drawing board with that, and I'm curious what they'll cook up. What I don't like is there to be like an easy deathmatch hero in any of the categories, really, because Moira is some combination of tanky, super mobile, has the best in class escape in the entire game. I think the players that like Moira as she is are just not going to be happy with the game of Overwatch overall, and I don't think we can appease them. No offense, but there's a lot of, let's say, metal rank Moiras that sort of just easily win a duel against a metal rank DPS by vaguely looking at them, where a character like Brig maybe does the same thing but requires a lot more skill to do. And then, you know, high rank players complain about Brig anyway, but it's self-evident that the skill floor of those two characters are quite different, and I think one is healthy and one isn't so healthy. So if Moira is going to be as easy as she is, I like the enfeeble direction overall, or something like that, to make her more similar to Mercy. Or they have to make her more difficult and skillful, which they have thought about as well, I think, with some experimental changes, like making the damage orb more user controlled. I don't know, it's tricky. But the rest of the support category, I think, is doing very well. In my tier list video, I was worried that Lucio might feel unessential with a lot of the other changes that we're making, but turns out repositioning and mobility in this game is just some of the most powerful things you have. And especially with a new map coming out with a lot of high ground, Lucio's still an amazing support and will continue to be. And with all that said, it's a strong category. Maybe the carry plays are a little hard to see nowadays because you don't have two teammate tanks to interact with, but there's a lot you can do. Moving on now to the DPS category. While I at first sort of hated the 30% ult charge change, overall I think it feels fair as a concept, and I got really confused with their original explanation of it. The language of where the cutoffs of the system was confusing to me, and maybe that's my fault, but the way the new DPS passive works is that you keep 100% of your ult points, but it's maxed out at 30% of the hero you're swapping to, which isn't how they languaged it. I'm rephrasing it to be that, but that's how it actually works. So a really cool thing about that is you can go have some impact, deal some damage, but lose the first fight, realize you're on a hero that's getting countered, and keep 100% of that ult charge, in many cases, up to 30% of the new hero. And the truth is, a lot of heroes' ults are similar in cost anyway. So let's say two heroes have the same ult cost overall. A lot of times in that first fight, you're not going to have more than 30% ult anyway. You swap and you'll just still be at 30% if their ult costs were 1-to-1. And even if they aren't, and let's say you have 50 or even 70% ult, I still find losing some percentage of that first hero's ult, it's way more beneficial to swap to a non-throw pick. And maybe this is just my fault because I'm constantly playing goofy heroes that are throw picks, but keeping a big chunk of that ult feels really good because ults are really impactful in Overwatch 2 and don't come as often. So being able to pick which ult you're gonna have soon is a lot better than I thought it might be. Like, let's say the enemy doesn't have a Genji counter and you go from losing on a hero you're getting countered on and swap into a faster blade. Well, they're never gonna catch up to be able to swap to something that will eventually build a response in time, right? Like, they see you swap to Genji, they can't run back and pick Zen or Lucio and expect to build up a support ult in time for the blade. There's cool things you can do like that. So overall, I think it's a good change. And maybe the best part of the change is that having DPS at 10% faster move speed was way too much carry for that role and way too much pressure on supports. Part of the reason why I think supports feel so much stronger is that DPS aren't farming them as much. And it feels like DPS have to respect the game a bit more, which is just good because no role can carry as hard as DPS, in my opinion. Like, you can think tanks carry the most and they are the strongest individual role. That is true, but I think the openings for skill ceiling are the highest on DPS. And because so much attention is on the tanks, they're more often to neutral out, right? Whereas DPS have the biggest windows to diff the enemy's DPS. I don't think it's controversial to say, and perhaps I hope most players would agree, and especially the overwhelming majority of players that aren't dedicated fans, that are just shooter fans, let's say the Shrouds of the world who tried Overwatch for a bit and was like, wow, there's a lot of shields in this game and got out. I think they're going to come back to Overwatch 2, pick the damage category, and love it. Because there's a manageable amount of RPG or MOBA abilities to interact with and just a lot of impact you can have in the role. One of the things I love the most about it is because as a primarily projectile player in the damage category, I was shocked at how effective so many of the projectile heroes are, mainly because their cooldowns are useful enough and have openings to be useful thanks to the one tank on the enemy team. There's so many cooldowns or playstyles that got countered by the level of stuns and defense in Overwatch 1. And while we might admit that Hitscan has the highest peak potential carry, the tool set that the Flex DPS has is harder for the enemy to interact with their cooldowns. So whether it's something like Genji Reflect, not being stunnable by everything, or Echo Focusing Beam being one of the best way to nuke down tanks, I'm finding so many ways to make an impact as damage, I feel, that I'm really happy with it. I think there actually might be a chance I'm more of a damage player in Overwatch 2 than I even was in 1. My SR on all three roles has been all over the place, up and down, meta depending, and based on whichever heroes I can actually play well versus the heroes I try to play poorly. But certainly them making the role a bit more about counter picking gives a huge boost to me personally. So I can't help but be happy about that, because that might be my very biggest strength in Overwatch, and one that I found easier to leverage in the open pick format, actually. In role queue, I'm a lot weaker as a player because it's a bit more about isolating the best heroes in that role, which might only be one, and maximizing them, which has never been my strength. But incentivizing swapping, well, now I'm getting excited because that's a boost to the strategy of the game. Next up, let's talk about tanks in general. We talked about Junker Queen, of course, but I want to pick up the conversation on the things I missed in the category overall. Obvious shout outs is like Doom was so clearly overly nerfed, so much so that I'm wondering if it was like a soft ban by the developers to like, don't play this hero, try out Junker Queen instead. I don't know. The nerfs were obviously overkill, and I think in some ways tank is a balancing nightmare for the developers due to the pug versus team gameplay problem. An example would be, I'm thinking that if we had a competitive mode and we were picking the maps, we would get to see the map design matter a lot more to tank gameplay, because in the beta, everyone just wants to play Junker Queen regardless if they are good at them or if it's good for the situation. And I think what would have happened if you could say select Gibraltar or Rio, you just wouldn't ever play Junker Queen on those maps, especially not on defense, in the same way that Casino Royale is pretty much just a Sigma map, frankly. In my experience, the players weren't trying too hard to create oppressive meta combinations, but just like Andy said in a response on the forums, the strategy of your team comp wins when the tactics, or let's say individual carry or skill of both teams is even, and I agree with that completely. There's many cases I found where just having a better comp for the map was overwhelmingly an advantage. And when you're in a competitive scenario, I think players are less likely to just be constantly experimenting. But what am I saying? This is the Overwatch community, and we've played Overwatch 1 for years. Okay, at least I think when you pick the map as a team or as a voting system or as a draft or whatever we're going to get, I think you will at least get to have your one-trick teammates on the maps that they want to be playing, as opposed to getting them on the maps that you're going to have a horrible time playing with them on. That might cause an entirely separate debate about should one-tricks get to pick their favorable maps or not. I bet we'll have that conversation once we get closer to the competitive 2.0 conversation and we know what system they have. I'll preface that by saying, I think yes, because the play experience matters so much more than worrying about leaderboard fairness, okay? As long as you track that, let's say, a Symmetra one-trick always picks Li Jiang, for example, somehow, and you know they're getting their SR based on Li Jiang and other maps like it that's actually good for the hero, avoiding maps like Gibraltar, where I don't think she's any good, that's fine. Like, what would you rather have as any other player in those lobbies with that player? Do you want to stomp them when they're on the bad map? Do you want them on your team when they're on their bad map? Now do that same argument for any type of hero, tank included. You might worry that SR will be inflated or boosted based on those map selections, but that happens anyway, right? Based on the balance of the game. Let's worry about maximizing competitive integrity in the tournament mode that will be coming down the line, not in the pickup game, quick play plus mode that is making a full return in Overwatch 2. Let's try to make that one the least annoying and the most fun. Last section, I just want to shout out the general vibe and improvements of Overwatch 2, whether it's the graphics, the looks, or lots of the voice lines. That's been some of the most exciting content, I think, for Overwatch fans, finding a lot of these unique voice lines that are hard to access because they're based on some very specific interaction. Like just the other day, I posted to Twitter, when Junkrat snipes Echo out of the sky, he says, "Couldn't you just fly away?" And a lot of heroes have trash talk like that, or fun interactions that makes the devs feel like they understand the community of players that play their game and the characters themselves. I'm hoping more people get the sense that Overwatch 2 is an improvement when that environment is more polished up. And I'm hoping that it has a wow factor at release at October 4th. I'm sure the devs plan on it feeling that way for sure. I hope it lands. Other gameplay related things that I just can't live without anymore: the scoreboard and ping system. It feels like half the Reddit threads in r/Overwatch are about these things. Maybe we just take a ping system for granted nowadays, but the devs and Jeff Kaplan years ago talked about how difficult it would be to implement. Like, they were trying to work on it without making it cluttered and annoying. And what they ended up doing is just recording tons of voice lines and adding what I assume took a ton of work in order to be able to communicate the complex types of callouts that are in Overwatch, which change based on what hero you're playing and the situation. An example is when a support uses the contextual ping, "I'm watching here," I believe it changes to something like, "This is my line of sight," or "I'm looking here," right? So that you can tell your Genji where you can see to heal him. Stuff like that is insane. And I love using the ping wheel to tell teammates when I'm going in, when I need help, where I want to hold on the map. And yeah, they don't always listen, but it's so much better and easier to play with randoms that way. And I think as well, for me as a player at least, it reminds me to calm down and tell my team what I'm doing so I don't feed. And the more all of us do that, the better teammates we will be to each other. And it's just such a great quality of life improvement to the game. I'll say the same thing for the scoreboard. We spoke about this a lot recently, but as I was reviewing a lot of the gameplay I had from the beta, I just kept finding examples of me saying in chat, "X hero, can you swap?" after seeing on the scoreboard they're 0-4 or something, which in Overwatch means they didn't contribute to a single elimination in 4 team fights. Like, that's really bad, okay? That means something's going really wrong, that you didn't even just tickle an elimination in order to get one, right? You're getting clowned if you're 0-4. Then they swap to something a bit more reliable for the situation, and the game feels so much easier. Being able to isolate those issues, or Ana's dying over and over, or my favorite example is as the Giga Tanks in this game, it's very easy to get lulled into thinking you're doing a lot, but then press the tab screen and see the enemy tank is doing a lot +2 or something, just a mega a lot due to the skill ceiling of the role. And so you can constantly check yourself, and we know there's far more depth going into that system, which is what the game needed. All of this, though, I'll say my final thoughts now, feels a bit rushed, right? And that's because it is, okay? They've pretty much said, and this is going to be my theory, okay? I don't know this to be a fact, but I think the team was voting, we want free to play. It's the only way for our game to not die. And Jeff Kaplan says, I don't want free to play. I'm the game director. I want to keep working towards the boxed model product with one price where you get all these things all at once. And if it takes 7 years to do, too bad. Which, if that was going to be their strategy, I wish they could have just publicly said that's what it was. But there's conflicting perspectives inside the company because on one hand, they got to increase the share price every year. It's a fiduciary duty. They have to continue to produce things. So if they say we're going dark on Overwatch 1 for potentially years so that we can make the best game we can, well, half of the company falls apart. So that wasn't the timeline we were able to get. It wasn't a reasonable thing, and it sucks that they weren't able to make that happen due to all the intercompany turmoil, Cerveza causing everyone to work from home. A lot of problems, man. It sucks. So now they give Jeff Kaplan the boot, say we're going free to play, get locked and loaded for battle passes and cosmetics, Overwatch community. The monetization won't feel as fair as you remember it, but we're going to constantly be improving the game. It's a bold strategy that has been such a turn from the expectations of the general player that everyone seems still confused about it. I see journalists make articles confused about it. They make conclusions such as, wow, Overwatch 2 is replacing Overwatch 1. As if that's a headline. I mean, that's the first thing Jeff said on stage pretty much when he announced it, where they're going to merge the game and update the old one. I don't know how people are struggling to keep up with this, but I guess it's because it was so obtuse what the impressive part of redefining the sequel was supposed to be to begin with, in an era where games were getting updated constantly as free to play anyway, that no one can make heads or tails of what this product's supposed to be. I think I understand, but most people are confused, and they reasonably are wondering, why don't you have far more progress if you've been working so long? Truth is, they haven't been. The plans changed too much. They went a different direction. And what they have is what they've done in like a year, I feel, after finally dedicating to this direction. And I just feel like I'm impressed with where that is. I'm impressed with the direction it's going to be going. And if development is as expensive as it's claimed to be, well, they have to monetize the game. Now, we hope it's going to be fair. We'll have to see what they fall on in terms of the prices for different things. But overall, as someone who just wants to keep playing this game and get back to Overwatch 2 as fast as possible, to actually get updates and feel like it's a living game again, it's a bitter pill I'm very willing to swallow to get all the benefits and fun that the game has available to me. I don't want to play other games. Like, I don't think people get this. Like, I went to Valorant, made viral videos in that scene, and just kind of got bored with trying to cover 2 games. My heart is with Overwatch. And since they overall are making more decisions that I like than dislike, it makes me excited to cover the game when it's finally out. So I hope you will be interested to watch videos about it. If you are and are excited to see more Overwatch content from your Overwatch, be sure to click the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified directly to your cell phone when our new videos come out. You can support us by checking out our sponsor of today's video, Manscaped. Use our promo code Overwatch at checkout to get 20% off your entire order and free shipping. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.